Hey guys, and welcome back to the Curious Curators. I'm Hope.
And I'm Lindsay.
And happy Women's History Month.
Yeah.
So, if you can't guess by me saying that, our next couple of episodes will focus on women's history.
Yeah, March has 5 Tuesdays, so expect a lot on that.
Yes, a little bit of housekeeping. If you hear any really loud noises, we're in the middle of a construction zone.
We're doing renovations at the museum, and it's not a quiet activity.
Yeah, so we will try to edit any out, but we really can't make any guarantees at this point.
Yeah.
It might be loud. So we do apologize if that's the case, but we can't help it anymore.
Yeah.
So today we are going to talk about a fun one. Today we're going to talk about women warriors.
Dun 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 dun, Xena.
So we love Xena.
We love Xena.
Everything about Xena.
Grew up with Xena, the warrior princess.
Yes. So as historically accurate as that show might seem to you, it's fantastic, and I think that it definitely told a generation of little girls that you can be a warrior, right?
Oh yeah, when my sister and I were very young, we would take, I believe we had a frisbee for her chakram.
Yes.
And, I think we had some plastic gardening tools.
Yeah.
And we used to play Xena and Gabrielle.
Yeah, and I will go ahead and say this. I saw a picture of Lucy Lawless recently, and she hasn't aged at all.
No.
So, I think she's found the fountain of youth, or Xena
I'm
really
sure
is
that's
immortal.
like a plot line that has happened in Xena. It's been a while since I watched it. I'm going to have to start watching it again. But I'm sure they found, like, ambrosia, because that's the Greek.
Yeah, that's how you become immortal. Maybe she
Yeah.
really had some, because she still looks...
But it's in New Zealand.
Yeah. Because she still looks, like, amazing. I saw a picture of her and I was like, girl, you haven't aged a day in these past 20 years. But I will go ahead and let everyone down and tell you that Xena is mythical.
Yeah.
So I'm so sorry to ruin anyone's day by saying that, but...
Gloomy day here.
It is
Might as well just give us all the bad news.
Right, just give us all the bad news. Xena's not real. But there are other women who were warriors.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
We will definitely give them that. Xena is probably a conglomeration of about 50 other women throughout history. I would say she's probably a conglomeration of other people.
Yeah.
This episode is not about Xena.
It is not about Xena, but whenever you talk about warrior women, I mean, at least for our generation...
Yeah,
I think Xena's like the first warrior woman to come to mind.
Yeah, I mean, she really is. Unless you think about like Wonder Woman or something now.
That's true, but it's in her name, warrior princess.
Yeah, and we're definitely millennials, so that was us as children. But we will say, we'll talk about some real ones, but go ahead and excuse all the Xena references that'll be peppered throughout this podcast.
Most likely, yes.
So... I did some research on Boudicca.
Right.
Mostly because Boudicca is the first like warrior woman that really comes to my mind, because of something that happened to me once, and that is I went to London with my family, my parents, and I thought it was called like the London Bridge Experience and the London Tombs, and I thought that was going to be like walking through an archaeological site and seeing like plague pits. That is not what it was. What it was a haunted house.
Okay.
And the beginning of the haunted house it was like eerie, but it wasn't scary. But there was this big part on Boudicca and how she was like a British hero, basically.
Okay.
And I vividly remember that because that was like the last of the not terrifying parts of that experience. But Boudicca was a real person, and she actually lived in about 61 AD CE is like when she really like became popular. But she was a queen of a British Celtic tribe called the Iceni. It's Iceni, in case you speak Gaelic better than I do. And she actually led an uprising against Rome. And I always love a good fight against the Romans. So.
And Horrible Histories has a great song about her, too.
Yeah. So watch that Horrible History show, too, because we could, like, we plug them as often as we can. But Boudicca was of royal descent, but her husband was the king. And then, like, he died, and she became the queen. And when Claudius, the emperor of Rome.
Okay.
In case anyone wasn't sure
Just
about
to
that.
clarify which Claudius we're talking about. The Emperor Claudius, not the accountant Claudius.
Except for, who knows. But anyway, so in 43, Claudius decided to try to take over Britain. And they actually allied with the Romans. And that allowed them to remain independent. Because that was kind of a thing that happened. If you were on Rome's side, Rome would grant you some favors. And one of those favors is allowing your tribe or city or whatever to remain independent with just a Roman governor. So, I will say a lot of our information comes from like a man called Cassius Dio. He is a historian.
Sounds like a fantastic metal band name.
It kind of does. And he is a Roman historian. Why are we not surprised? And he wrote about Boudicca in one of the 80 plus volumes of history that he had published. So he was a very busy man. And he actually described her. So we have something there. He says that she is tall with tawny hair, which I think is like reddish, brownish blonde.
I thought tawny hair was like a light brown, dark blonde.
So she had tawny hair, and it hung down below her waist, a harsh voice, and a piercing glare. Thank you, sir.
Not to skip ahead a little bit, but I have somebody on mine that was described almost exactly like that.
So
one of mine. Just very interesting.
That is very interesting. And because
also like halfway across the world.
Yeah,
so they didn't know each other.
I guess the piercing glare and harsh voice.
Piercing glare, harsh voice, really tall.
So good old Cassius Dio was also super interested in clothes, I guess, because he gave us a rundown of what Boudicca always wore.
Ooh, I love that.
I do too, actually. So she wore a gold necklace, possibly like a torque, which is like a thing that sits like around your throat, like a little chokery type thing. That's gold and heavy. And a colorful tunic and a heavy cloak fastened with a brooch. How would you say that? Brooch? Mm-hmm. And I think that's like, duh, it's cold there. So of course she was wearing a cloak because it was cold. Anyway, so let's get on to the rebellion.
I'm just kind of upset that you didn't dress like Boudicca today.
I don't wear a choker.
I was about to say, you wear a choker all the time. You don't have a gold choker and a colorful tunic and a cloak? What kind of historian are you?
I'm literally the worst. My hair is long though, so at least I have that. So around 60, 61, it seems to be just a little bit, I guess it was a longer process. Anyway, there was a rebellion. So there is the current governor of Britain. I'm not even going to mention his name because he's not important. Because we're not talking about a governor, we're talking about Boudicca. So, he was leading this kind of campaign against an island called Mona. And the Iceni and a bunch of their neighbors were like, this is the perfect time to stage our rebellion. So Boudicca was actually chosen as the entire leader of the rebellion. So, which I think is really great. I think that it's great that all of these people got together and they were like, who's going to be great? Boudicca, a woman. 10 out of 10. And she actually said, "It was not as a woman descended from noble ancestry, but as one of the people that I am avenging lost freedom, my scourged body, the outraged chastity of my daughters." And then she went on to say, "This is a woman's resolve. As for men, they may live and be slaves." But all the men were still behind her, so good on you, girl. So in this rebellion, they were targeting specific cities that were held by Rome, larger cities. The first of those was Londinium, which is modern-day Colchester.
Okay.
And they basically destroyed the entire city, and this is something that I think we've seen throughout a lot of things. There was a statue of Nero. They chopped off its head and carried it around with them to prove that they had won that city. Mm-hmm. And archaeological evidence found in Colchester shows that the city was pretty much methodically destroyed all the way throughout. So they finished there, and they moved on to one that's going to sound familiar to everyone, Londinium.
Where could that be?
Who knows? Could it be modern-day London?
Nah. Too obvious.
Too obvious. The one place that kept its name.
Londinium.
So after the Romans came in...
That sounds like somebody making up a Roman name.
It really does.
Londinium.
After the Romans came in, Londinium became a big commercial center. I would say because it's centrally located, but it really isn't, so I'm not sure why. Anyway, and the rebels were marching on London, so they basically decided, we're going to let the city fall in order to save the entire province.
Okay.
So the Romans didn't think that they could fight inside the city, so they abandoned it.
Okay.
Because, the Roman army. So they abandoned it, and archaeological finds there show that there was a thick layer of burned debris, and underneath that they found coins and pottery that dated to before 60 AD. And Roman-era skulls were found in Walbrook, which is an area in London, and they're thought to be victims of a massacre. Basically, if you didn't leave with the Roman army, you died.
Okay.
And further excavations, so I'm not sure exactly how you go about excavations in a city full of, millions of people, but they have them. But I do know that they have them. I think that would be very difficult. But they've found that this destruction actually goes on both sides of the River Thames, so it was a very big area that was destroyed. And then they moved on to their last city. It's called Verulamum, or something along that nature. It is modern day St. Albans. And that is pretty much thought to be the next city destroyed because archaeological evidence there has found that there were rows of shops and everything that were also burned. They found that in the 1950s. The first excavations there were in the 1930s. And they didn't find anything because they were searching outside of the area of Roman occupation. But we have talked multiple times about early 20th century archaeology, so
we're big fans.
It's probably for the best that they were searching in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
But
is that an Indiana Jones reference? They're digging in the wrong place.
It was more of a Heinrich Schliemann bash, but it's whatever. So I think we all know what always happens with the Roman army, right? They rally because there's a lot of them.
Oh, I thought there was going to be a decimation because that's usually what I think about.
Just wait for it.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry. I got ahead of the narrative, sorry.
The Romans rallied. The place of their rallying is currently unknown. But they think that it is probably along the Roman road known as Watling Street.
Okay.
And I'm like, that's the best that you can come up with? But, okay, so the Roman troops are super outnumbered, but they ended up emerging victorious. So I am not a, battle strategist, but from what I understood reading this is
you'd probably get paid a lot more if you were a battle strategist.
I know. I think that would actually be kind of a cool job. But what I understand is they sort of funneled the troops, the British troops that were coming, or the troops that Britons, I guess, because they weren't British yet, but the troops that were coming, they funneled them into a small area, and then they had archers and spear throwers and everything that could wipe out large numbers at once before more came in and the same thing would happen. Which, I don't know, you would think that you would see that happening and come up with a new plan, but again...
Not a battle strategist.
Again, the military is never going to hire me for that. So, but
I don't know, they might hear this podcast and go, she said they probably shouldn't have done that still. Clearly a battle genius.
If you need a battle strategist, you know where to find me. And they actually said that Boudicca's army was 230 through 300,000 strong. That's a big number.
I can't believe there were that many people in
Britain.
The Isle.
Me either.
At the time.
Me either. And I did read a lot of things that said that ancient numbers might be exaggerated.
Well.
But I mean, who are we to know? Maybe it was very densely populated back then.
Okay.
Okay. So they were kind of massacred. And do you want to know what happened to Boudicca? It would be nice to know, wouldn't it? It would be great if we knew. But this is one of those things where they just don't really know. So Tacitus, another Roman historian, in case you couldn't tell by the name, said that she poisoned herself when she lost the battle. But then Cassius Dio, who we trust, said that she actually became ill and died and was given an extremely lavish funeral, fit for the ruler that she was.
Okay.
Which I think is a much nicer story than she just poisoned herself because she couldn't take losing. But I won't say Boudicca was forgotten, but she wasn't a super, important figure until, Elizabethan England.
Okay.
Elizabeth I kind of brought her to the forefront as, this important figure because she had, beat the Roman army, or kind of messed with the Roman army and then whatever. But she was a strong female queen who was in power. And you could, parallel that between Queen Elizabeth, and she was trying to lead armies and the same kind of thing. But it was Queen Victoria, who was queen for a very long time, so she had plenty of time to make people into legends. But it was then that the story really became legendary. Victoria was seen as Boudicca's namesake because their names actually mean the same thing.
What is that, Hope?
It is to conquer, victory. Who would have thought that Victoria meant victory? So
when we had this conversation earlier.
Yeah, we already had this conversation because I was like, hey, do you know what they...
So I'm just being
their
facetious.
names are the same, and Lindsay was like, what does it mean? And I was like, oh, I don't know, I didn't look that far yet.
And I was like, maybe victory because of Victoria?
Yeah, so she was important in her time. She kind of came back during the 1600s, and then Queen Victoria was like legendary. I'm sure she said it just like that too.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, and now I think Boudicca is relatively well known. I did reach out to Nicola, who I always ask questions when we talk about Scotland, and I was like, what can you tell me about Boudicca? And she said, not a lot. So there is that. But yeah, Boudicca was the first one that really came to my mind.
Okay. I wasn't going to do this person first, but because she has so many parallels to Boudicca, I kind of want to talk about Juti Jean. And Hope, it's funny because I looked up how to pronounce this Vietnamese name, and yet you still pronounce things wrong. You could look it up beforehand.
I know.
Sorry, I'm being shady.
No, she's not
Tacitus,
wrong. Is it Tacitus? Mm-hmm. Cactus? Oh, you're probably right. Look, I'm not even gonna lie. I could look up how to say it, and in 2.3 seconds, I would have already forgotten.
Well, that's why you write it down. Juti Jean.
One of us is better at that. That would be Lindsay, because I was just thinking when you said her name, I was like, yep, leave it to Lindsay to just have a really hard name.
Anyways, I was just being shady to Hope. Juti Jean lived in 226 to 248. She was, this was in northern Vietnam. Basically, at this time, the Chinese controlled northern Vietnam. And Juti Jean was... We're not so sure about her early life. There's like one source that talks about her where her parents died when she was young. She was raised by her older brother. And her sister-in-law, who was not nice. I would say other words, but...
Yeah. PG.
PG.
We're a Disney show.
There we go. And according to this, she killed her sister-in-law, and then ran away to either the mountains or the forest, or maybe a forest on a mountain.
Right on.
Sources said two different things. And gathered a bunch of people, about 1,000, to follow her to rebel against the Chinese occupation.
Okay.
So another rebellion of a foreign occupation. So she actually ended up leading 100 chiefs and 50,000 families. And she joined with another faction. So there were two factions that were fighting against Chinese occupation, and she joined with another one. She was unmarried, and she wore a yellow tunic into battle and called herself the Lady General, clad in a golden robe.
Okay, I like it. I also call myself the Lady General, so...
Right, there you go. This is my favorite quote, probably one of my favorite historical quotes ever from her.
Let's do it.
I'd like to ride storms, kill orcas in the open sea, drive out aggressors, reconquer the country, undo the ties of serfdom, and never bend my back to be the concubine of whatever man.
Okay, girl.
I was like...
I don't want to kill the orcas, but everything
I
else
don't want to
I'm
kill
on
the
board
orcas,
with.
but I'm with you on everything thing.
Else I'm on board with.
Yeah, I'm on board with everything else except the orca killing. And she kind of became aggrandized later. People described... So the Chinese didn't mention her at all. Southeast Asia was a little bit more I don't want to say feminist, because they weren't feminist, but women had more power in Southeast Asia. In China, they had very little power. And she was kind of a nuisance for them. Rebels were a dime a dozen. The fact that she was a woman warrior riding into battle, really, they didn't care. So all the stuff we have is from the Vietnamese perspective. And she sort of became legendary over time. Okay. They said she was 9 feet tall and had a voice like a temple bell and like a piercing gaze that the Chinese couldn't even look at her.
Oh, I like
lest they get her piercing gaze. She could eat like many rice pecks and could walk 500 leagues per day. And she had 3-foot-long breasts that she threw over her shoulders when she rode into battle on top of an elephant.
So she was super easy to hide then. She didn't stand out at all.
Right.
Love it. Love it.
And just like Boudicca, we really don't know what happened to her. One source said she was defeated in battle because she thought this rebellion lasted for several months. Okay. But the Chinese did end up quashing this rebellion. And she was either defeated in battle or she left and committed suicide after she was defeated in battle.
Right.
And I believe she was 21, maybe?
That's so young.
She was very young. Yeah, she was just shy of 22, I believe, when she died.
That's so young.
Yeah. So,
that makes me feel so unaccomplished.
I know.
We're out leading rebellions, riding elephants, walking 500 leagues a day.
I know.
And I'm just having 17 cups of coffee.
I know.
We're the best.
We can't even walk 1 league a day, and we're chugging coffee. I don't know what she was drinking, but
I need some too.
So she was sort of a legendary Vietnamese warrior, queen type figure.
I like it. I've noticed. I noticed when I was researching both of mine. I don't know if you noticed this as well. I feel like they're always like, we don't know much about when she was younger. Like, we don't really know.
No. Well, because women weren't significant in many societies until they made a mark.
Right. It just frustrates me because it's like you can read probably Cassius Dio here his entire life story and know what
he was just a historian.
Yeah, you know what he ate for breakfast every day, but someone else probably wrote about him.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Men could accomplish very little and get written about, but women had to really stand out. I mean, she was leading 50,000 families. I don't know what the number would be on that, but 50,000 families into battle.
Yeah. And they're like...
Before her name got written down.
That's it. That drives me absolutely insane.
And the Chinese didn't even write about her.
Yeah.
They didn't care.
Stuff like that drives me absolutely insane. I'm like, it's so unnecessary to be like, oh, well, we just don't really know anything.
Yeah.
You could guess. You could at least tell us what women of that time period were like, maybe, and would have like been doing. And
somebody could have asked her a few questions, like, hey, lady, 9-foot-tall lady on the elephant.
Right. Do you have any family? Tell us something. Yeah, like that. It drives me absolutely crazy. I noticed that when I was researching both of mine is like, they don't really say much. No. Or they tell you who her father was.
Yep.
And I'm like, that means nothing to me. What did he do?
Yep.
Nothing. I have a discussion question for the end, so we're fine.
Well, I can do the other one that I have a short blurb on. These two, there wasn't a whole lot of information on them, so we agreed to do 2 each, but I had such little information on these two that I ended up doing 3. But speaking of telling you who her father was, this is about Kudalun, who was a Mongol princess. She was born in 1260. She died in 1306. She was the daughter of Kaidu Khan. And he was either a cousin or a nephew of Kublai Khan. 2 different sources said 2 different things.
Right.
He was a close relative of Kublai Khan. She was her father's favorite out of her 14 brothers.
Go girl.
And she would ride into battle with him. She was his military advisor, and it was said that she would ride with her father amongst horseback in the army, and she would shoot out and snatch up captives from the opposite team and ride back to her opposite army. This isn't capture the flag. They said she did it as easily as a hawk snatching a chicken.
Okay.
Which would be kind of terrifying if you're facing down an army and all of a sudden some woman on horseback comes out, grabs somebody, and runs back. That would be terrifying.
That would be terrifying. Honestly, though, I would never be in a position to be facing an army, so.
She was... So my favorite story about her, and I think the most famous one, is that there was a lot of pressure for her to get married. No shock there. That's a common theme with...
Because she was just a little woman.
Right. Well, here's the thing. She said, all right, cool, Dad, and everybody else. I will get married to a man who can defeat me in wrestling.
Okay. Did anyone defeat her in wrestling?
No.
Okay, then.
They had to wager 100 horses.
Okay.
And if they won, then they got to marry her. Because she was basically a princess, essentially.
Yeah, it would be, like, quite the honor to marry her.
Yes, and her father wanted her to be his successor.
Oh, so she needed children for that.
She would need a son. She would need a husband and children. But, you know, if you married Kudalun, you could probably be the Khan.
Yeah, exactly.
So they had to wager 100 horses as a bet that they could defeat her. She ended up with a herd of horses numbering over 10,000 and no husband.
That's fantastic.
And the only reason she actually did end up getting married later in life, because one of the issues was there was a lot of mounting pressure, but people started saying she was having an incestuous affair with her father.
Oh, see, that, like, clearly she probably was, I mean, we're not going to say for sure, but, like, clearly she probably wasn't, but that's a way to get you to do what people want.
Oh, yeah. She was not, but people kept saying that because she was a woman who wasn't married, you know. Because if a woman's not married, it's clearly because she's having an incestuous relationship with her father.
I bet Freud would have had a field day.
Exactly. So she eventually did get married. One source said, so there are two different sources on her. One is Marco Polo. One is, I believe, an Arab explorer. I didn't write his name down, so I don't remember off the top of my head. One of them, the Arab explorer said that she fell in love with, I think, a Persian sultan or something. Kind of makes sense that he would say that.
No farmers for her.
No. While Marco Polo, I believe, said she got married just to some guy to stop the rumors.
I mean, fair.
So I believe personal opinion, I think she got married to a random guy to stop the rumors. I don't think she had this great romance with a Persian sultan or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I didn't write that stuff down because I didn't care about who she married because she's awesome.
Yeah, like, we don't care about the
We don't care about the husband.
Sorry.
But basically she got married so that she got rid of these rumors and under mounting pressure, but she still wasn't ever defeated in wrestling.
That's fantastic.
Like, she just sat there and she was like, okay, I guess I have to marry.
Yeah.
And she got married.
I like her.
She didn't make him defeat her in wrestling. So she was Kaidu's favorite. Supposedly he named her his successor, but that didn't happen because she was female.
Right.
And they're not really sure what happened to her as far as her death. It might have been in battle, because I think she was 40-something, 46.
Okay, well, I'm glad she was at least a little bit older.
Yeah.
All right, so my next one is Artemisia the First.
Oh, there was more than one?
Yeah, I think there were at least two. The second one built this big, like, temple-y thing at Halicarnassus that is no longer there.
Can I be the third?
Yes. Yes. She's the queen of Caria. That is the Greek city-state that, like, encompasses where Halicarnassus is. And she actually...
Watch out, Caria. I'm coming to be your
Coming to be
queen.
the queen. And this was actually in 480 BC, so this is a very long time ago. Many, many moons.
All right.
She fought as an ally of Xerxes. Mm-hmm. Is that his name? Oh, wow. I actually asked her that yesterday, so... Okay, he was the king of Persia, in case no one watched 300. Is it 300? Right. Yeah.
Where he was played by Rodrigo Santoro.
Exactly.
I'm just saying.
So this is like during the second Persian invasion of Greece, clearly. And she actually... So she sent 5 ships, and she actually personally commanded them in 2 naval battles. I don't know if she fought in more naval battles or if these were the ones that she commanded in. It didn't say. But these are the battles of Artemisium.
You know, the Romans and the Greeks were really just top-notch at names.
They really were. And Salamis, and these were both in 480. And we know the stuff that we know about her mostly from Herodotus. Is that how you say his name?
I've heard Herodotus, but I imagine Herodotus is fine too.
Herodotus.
Neither of us speak Greek, so.
I can only say one word and I can't say it on this, so.
I can't say any. Is PETA Greek word?
Ooh, F. Christo is how you say thank you.
Oh, okay.
So
there we go.
2 words. I know 2 words.
Every day's a school day, as Hope likes to say.
It really is. So the battle that she's most well known for is the Battle of Salamis. And Xerxes was basically told to go ahead and attack the Greek fleet under unfavorable conditions. And Artemisia was the only one of his commanders that was like, that's a bad idea. But he didn't listen to her, of course.
Well, obviously.
That would have been too easy. And went ahead and attacked. But she ended up earning his praise and respect for her leadership during this whole thing. I think probably also for standing up to him. But the Persian Navy was defeated at this point. So, but she was apparently a very good leader. I always think it's really interesting when they're like, you did a great job losing. I mean, it wasn't just her, clearly, but, you know, like...
Yeah, that's... that happens. Yeah.
But he is said to have said that she excelled above all other officers, and he sent her a full set of Greek armor.
Ooh.
I know. And then he later asked her to give him some more advice, which I think is, like, good, because she was going to give you better advice than anybody else. And basically it was, should he go back to Asia Minor and allow Mardinius, like another one of his commanders, to be in charge? And she said yes, and said he should be able to be in charge of 300,000 Persians. He followed that advice, you know, to the Persian invasion of Greece. But this is kind of where I start to get frustrated. Great, she gave you great advice. You said that she was the best of your commanders. So after the battle, he sent her to Ephesus, which is in Turkey, to look after his illegitimate children. So you made her a nanny? Nothing wrong with being a nanny. I know it pays well, but like that's what
you're my greatest war general. Can you be my nanny?
Yeah.
Do you think that would happen to any of the 5-star generals in the U.S. right now?
I wouldn't let General Patton be my nanny.
There you go.
That's the only one.
General Patton. Would you be a nanny?
Who was it? Was it Maddox that was the Secretary of Defense or whatever? He was a something in the Marine Corps. Yeah. General.
I don't know, but I know who you're talking about.
The list of 5-star generals that I can name is non-existent. I'm so sorry. Except for Patton, and he's dead.
I could pretty much guarantee none of them became nannies.
Yeah.
Unless this is what, Kindergarten Cop or whatever.
Yeah. But her story doesn't even get, like, better. It just gets worse, in my opinion. So we don't know what happened after she went to Ephesus to be a babysitter.
Okay.
But Photius repeated a legend about it. 13 centuries later. Literally. Okay. I feel like I'm on SpongeBob where they're like 2 hours later. 13 centuries later. Apparently what happened to Artemisia is she fell in love with this guy called Dardanus, and he ignored her. So there was something about how she blinded him while he was asleep or something, but he still didn't like her, because why would you like someone that blinded you when you went to sleep? Anyway,
fair.
So she was falling more and more and more in love with him. So then an oracle told her to jump off of the top of the rock of Leucas. Jumping off the top of this rock apparently cured you of the passion of love. Well, Sappho also is said to have died by jumping off of this rock.
Okay. Well, I mean, if it kills you, I guess you are cured.
Yeah. So she died when she jumped off the rock.
Nice.
What? Like, that is the story that you're going to stick to? Nothing else. Like, she just fell in love with somebody and he didn't like her back, so she killed herself.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel they treated Kudalun. It was like, no, she fell madly in love with, like, this Persian Khan. And
Because they can't be good in their own right.
Yeah.
They can only be good if they're married.
Yeah. So another person I researched that I actually got a little bit more information on was Tomoe Gozin, who lived from 1157 to 1247 most likely. So you may notice that's about 90 years.
Yeah, that's a significant amount of time.
So in feudal Japan, you had the samurai class, which was the warrior class. And women in feudal Japan and even before were actually taught to defend their communities.
Okay.
In case there weren't men around, they were off to war. Women were taught to use the naginata, which is like a spear with a knife on the end, a kaiken, and how to use tanto jutsu with the kaiken, which is a type of dagger. And it was basically, so you had the spear for further away quarters and then close quarters with the kaiken.
Okay.
And these women who trained in this were called onabugeisha, which is like defensive fighting. But there was another class of women called the onamusha, and Tomoe Gozin was in onamusha.
Okay.
And Tomoe Gozin is not her name. Gozin's like an honored title. And Tomoe was the name of the pattern of her armor because it was disrespectful to say a woman's given name. So the pattern on her armor was called Tomoe. So that's why she was called Tomoe Gozin.
That's interesting.
And she actually did not train with the naginata and the kaiken. She trained with bow and arrow and a sword. And she participated in the Genpei War from 1180 to 1185, which was a civil war in Japan between the Kyoto-based aristocratic Taira clan, who were symbolized with red, and the kind of backwater country folk, the Minamoto clan, who were symbolized with white. So, on the Japanese flag today, there's red and white.
Yes.
And they also do that a lot in competitive events. One team is red and one team is white.
Right.
Kind of like we do shirts and skins, I guess.
Yeah. Because we just have to. We're too much all the time. So
yeah. Like her father was the foster father of one of the prominent lords of the Minamoto clan, Kiso no Yoshinaka. So her father was his foster father, and her mother was his wet nurse. And apparently she and Lord Yoshinaka had a thing, which I think is kind of weird because they were basically brother and sister.
I think this is also something that happens like historical romance and stuff. That's a very romance novel thing to like the foster child or another child living in your house. They like, get together. That's a very like romance novel thing. So I wonder if that's just been influenced over time. Yeah,
there are discussions as to whether or not she was like an attendant or a servant, or if they were lovers, or if she was some sort of concubine or wife to him.
Maybe they're the real inspiration for why that's a thing in romance novels.
Who knows? Maybe so.
Let us know.
Not entirely clear what their relationship was. Basically, they were close, is what I'm getting at there. And there's a nice little description of her. She was especially beautiful with white skin, long hair, and charming features. She was also a remarkably strong archer, and as a swordsman, she was a warrior worth 1,000, ready to confront a demon or a god, mounted or on foot. She handled unbroken horses with superb skill. She rode unscathed down perilous descents. Whenever battle was imminent, Yoshinaka sent her out as his first captain. I have terrible handwriting. That's why I'm struggling.
Same. I'm blurry. That's why I have to type my notes most of the time because I couldn't read.
Equipped with strong armor, an oversized sword, and a mighty bow, and she performed more deeds of valor than any of his other warriors. And she was essentially his leading commander, called Ippo no Taisho. And during the Battle of Yokotakawara, she collected 7 heads of mounted enemies. Okay. And during the 1183 Battle of Tonamiyama, she led over 1,000 cavalry to victory.
Oh, wow.
And you were talking about giving people credit for being the loser of a battle. In 1184, in the Battle of Uchide no Hama, she led 300 against 6,000 of the Taira warriors, cavalry essentially.
Jesus.
And she was one of the 5 survivors from her side. But people still gave her a lot of credit for surviving.
Well, yeah, I would too.
And really, one of the big things that happened was, in that same year, 1184, was the Battle of Owazu. And so this was sort of a fight within the Minamoto clan about who was going to rule, because they were winning against the Taira. And so they started fighting against each other to see who would win. So Tomoe and Yoshinaka were on one side versus Yoshinaka's cousin, Yoritomo, and his warrior, essentially his right-hand man, was Yoshitsune. And basically, once again, there were only 5 survivors left of Yoshinaka's side, which was Tomoe's side. Yoshinaka did not want to die with a woman at his side. He was like, what would people say about me if I died with a woman at my side? So he ordered her to leave. And she was like, yeah, sure thing, I will do that, boss. But first, I want to go out with a bang. So she rode into a group of like 30 enemy warriors, and she wanted to face down their strongest opponent. So she faced down their strongest opponent, beheaded him, and then she got out of Dodge.
I mean, smart woman. Bah.
But this is one of those things where no one is necessarily certain what happened to her. Some say she lived for 91 years and became a nun, a Buddhist nun. Well, don't make that face because it's better than all the other options.
Oh, okay. That doesn't sound good.
She was made a concubine to one of Yoritomo's men. Or she collected the head of Yoshinaka, her lover, walked into the sea and drowned herself. So I prefer Buddhist nun.
Yeah, I hope she
living for 91 years.
Buddhist nun, yeah.
And she also inspired future female warriors such as Nakano Takeko. 1847 to 1868. She fought during the Boshin Civil War.
Okay.
Women were not permitted to fight, but she gathered up a whole bunch of female warriors and fought anyways. And she actually managed to kill 7 soldiers with her naginata before she was killed by being shot. She rode into battle with traditional weapons against rifles and got shot. But people used to think that this was really rare, female warriors, but actually archaeological evidence has pointed to that there were actually a lot more than we thought, and they were just excluded from history. Shocker of all shockers, I know.
That's why you still don't really hear about, I mean, like, at this point, I don't know, like, I know women now can join most militaries, like, realistically, but I also know that, or I think I could be wrong, they often don't let women into combat situations. Correct. Like, the Marine Corps doesn't put women in combat.
Yes.
The only, like, female soldiers that I can think of off the top of my head that go into combat situations are Israeli. Yeah. Everyone serves in the Israeli military. Like, you don't have a choice. But...
Well, and a lot of militaries around the world who have, like, a mandatory serving time, it only applies to men.
I mean, we have
like South Korea.
We have a selective service as well.
And only men have to register.
Ukraine is the same way. Men serve, like, is it like 2 years? I think it's not a very long time.
Yeah.
But I'm sure if you're at war, it's eons. But, yeah.
Yeah.
That's so frustrating. Like, you just wipe them off the historical record and pretend like they didn't exist.
So they actually, we have evidence here that they excavated the 1580 Battle of Senbon. Hold on. I think I wrote Matsubaru. Sorry, I have really bad handwriting. 35 out of the 105 buried there were female. So
that's a lot. I mean, that's a significant point, yeah.
And 2 other battlefields, this is all DNA testing. 2 other battlefields showed basically the same distribution, like 1/3 of the warriors are women. And this is in Japan.
I wonder when I don't know what
Confucianism.
Military is. Oh, okay, I was like, I wonder when things started changing.
Confucianism from China.
That makes sense.
Most likely. Because even pre-feudal era, pre-samurai, women were trained in defense.
Right.
And they actually would take their, like, naginata with them when they got married to their new family.
That's really interesting.
So
it's annoying that
colonialism and Confucianism and those combinations.
That in the developed world or the first world,
which isn't. That's a rant for another day.
It's not a thing anymore. But like, women are still supposed to be barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Which is, we're just breaking stereotypes left and right over here. I kind of
you've got on slides, so.
I don't only cook for me. I did want to have just like a little discussion because I noticed some similarities when you were talking, and I noticed when I looked these things up, like, we don't know a lot about their lives.
No, before or after.
And it seems like most of these stories end with like a tragic romance.
Yeah.
And Shakespeare didn't write these people's lives. So I find it difficult to believe that every single female warrior that there ever was that was written about, the reason that like they died or something was because they actually loved a man, and it just doesn't work out. And that, I think that's such a disservice to these people.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a disservice to people that were giving up their lives, basically. Because, I mean, especially if you're a soldier in, like, ancient Greece or feudal Japan or anything else, like, I mean, there's a large chance that you're not going to come home.
I would be so mad if, I was a warrior and found out that they remembered me for a tragic love story at the end. That wasn't even real. Like a made up love story. Or like, well, she just couldn't take her defeat, so she just killed herself. Like, I mean, maybe. Like, that's probably more of a possibility than this romance. And I love a good romance, but like, I don't want to remember. What did they remember, like, Genghis Khan for? Right.
I mean, for having like common DNA from every 7 people or something. That's true. So let's throw Genghis Khan out the window. But like, what do they remember Patton for?
Right. But I mean, Genghis Khan, his wife, I believe his wife was Boudicca.
Yeah.
I mean, he had a romance because he went and, if I'm remembering, I think it's Genghis and not Kubla. Yeah, it's Genghis. Boudicca was his wife, and she got kidnapped by another group. And he went after them and saved her. Oh. And so he had a romance, but that's not what people remember him from. Yeah. And not only that, when he got her back, she was pregnant.
But he stayed with her.
Well, yeah, I mean, it wasn't really her choice.
Right, no, that's, I know, but you know that's a pretty common thing that men, like, historically, men will be like, bah.
And he basically took the child as his own. And there's a possibility it could have been Genghis's, right. But there's also a possibility it could have not been Genghis's, but he still took it as his own child.
It's sad when you have to stay good on him for being an okay person.
Right.
But, well, I mean, like, okay is relative.
But, I mean, the point here is that he had, like, a romance. This was early before he became super warlord.
Yeah.
But we remember him for his warrior status.
I think one of the only men that like, just springs to mind that you remember for a romance is Paris.
He wasn't a warrior, though.
I was about to say, but we remember him as a coward.
Yeah, that's true.
So, like, they think of Paris as a coward, but his romance was like center stage.
But Achilles had a romance. Hector had a romance.
Yeah, Andromache. I just enjoy her name a lot.
And Achilles possibly had several romances.
Yeah, like Achilles had a kid.
Yeah, he had Briseis and he had Patroclus and
that girl that he had the kid with in wherever. Yeah. It's not in my head, but
Alexander the Great.
Romance,
but that's not what we remember any of them by.
Lewis and Clark were probably both married. I mean, just to throw some like familiar names in there, like
people don't know Alexander the Great. I mean, I think sometimes, like, do a lot of people know him? Yes, but there will be that one person that is like, I don't know who any of those people are. But think about the difference between like Ivan the Great and Ivan the Terrible and Catherine the Great, who's remembered for romances.
Oh, yeah, she is remembered for romances and rumors. Marie Antoinette as well, for her affairs and rumors. Cleopatra.
Yep.
who led armies too.
But nobody remembers Caesar that way.
No. Or Mark Antony even.
Yeah.
Even though Mark Antony was kind of an idiot. Like,
yeah.
I mean, like, in all fairness.
And the only worthwhile thing he ever did was hook up with Cleopatra.
Yeah. Like,
because she was smart.
Yeah. She had to be just to survive her childhood.
Yeah.
Like,
she was smart and she was powerful. She was ruthless.
Yeah. There was when people were delivering her messages and they had to bow, they were afraid that she would stab them in the throat. That got dark fast. But yeah, I think that's the case.
No, I was thinking now I have a new hero.
Right. I think that's the case with so many like women throughout history, is that people are
they get reduced to romance.
They had these great romances, and it's like, okay, but that's not all they did.
That's why I really like Juti Jean, because she died unmarried.
10,000 horses, baby.
No, that was Kudalun.
Oh, I was like 10,000 horses.
I do like Kudalun though too, but they tried to reduce her to falling in love and.
Yeah, I mean that's what it always is. I wonder like, we grew up in the age of like Disney princesses and whatnot, so like that love story thing has always been there for us. Like, you have these like great people, like you have like Mulan,
but I still call bullcrap on this stuff.
Yeah. But, like, you know what I mean? You have, like, Mulan, who was this great warrior and blah, blah, but then she, like, got married at the end and lived happily ever after. I'm not saying she wasn't...
Which Mulan did actually have a happily ever after.
Yeah, she used to carry her baby into battle.
Yeah, she just went home and she's, like, cool.
But I think that...
I lived.
Like, as children, we were taught, like... It doesn't matter how great you are, you should just get married at the end. And I don't think that's the fault of our parents. I think that that's, like, the media and everything else that did that to us. But you have to wonder, what was it like in, like, the 1700s? Were they telling the same stories about, like...
Oh, I'm sure.
People running off and getting married?
Oh, I'm sure.
Well, I guess that is true.
I mean, we have stories from back then.
I will also say, and, you know, I read a lot. I read a lot of historical romance, and one of the things, and this bothers me so much, is you have this female character that's meant to be so strong, but then, like, all she wants to do is get married and be a wife and mother and run her own house. You can't have any other ambitions.
Yeah, I know.
And then, like, the ones that are, like, scholars or something else, they're wallflowers and, like, all, you know?
Yeah.
But it's, like, I think especially now, especially in 2021, and especially with, like, how popular things like that are getting, like, you need other things. You don't need to be, like, there are other aspirations to have.
And I don't say you can't aspire to be a wife or a mother and ride into battle with your baby on your back.
But there's other things to life than just, like, being married and having babies. And, like, I think that's something that kids are starting to get now. But I think a lot of people that I went to school with had kids in high school. Like, you're still a kid. I don't know. I feel like even now, a lot of times, that idea is sort of pushed at you.
Well, yeah, I think that's continuously pushed at you, but, you know, there are a lot. We didn't discuss any of them this time because, you know, we said we have to limit it because we talk too much. You know, there are stories of women riding into battle 8 months pregnant or with a baby on their back. You know, you can be a warrior and a mother.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, they're not exclusionary.
No, definitely not. But I think that it's extremely frustrating that we have 5 women here and most of their lives are reduced.
Most of them were reduced to the romance that they had.
A failed romance at that.
Yeah.
Most of them are a failed romance. Or, you know, or suicide.
Or both.
Yeah. And that's...
a failed romance that led to suicide because they couldn't possibly live without the man.
Yeah. Like, and that's just frustrating. And
but how many men do that? How many stories about men do we hear their beloved dies and then they commit suicide?
Romeo.
They both commit suicide.
And it's not even real.
No.
It's not even real. So that's definitely something to think about as well, I think, is when you read about... I mean, if you're anything like us, you probably look things up all the time. So when you read about these people, you have to know that there was more to their lives than some crappy legend about them jumping off the true love rock.
Yeah, and you definitely have to have a critical eye towards these things. Like, is this a narrative that was created for the sake of creating a story, or is this historical record? And
did it happen at the time? Like, was it written down at the time, or was it written down 1,300 years later?
Right, because that's an issue that you run into as well. With, like, Juti Jean, she like, some of the stuff was written down during her time, but a lot of it was written way later, like, you know, being 9 feet tall.
Yeah.
I want you to look at these ideas of them throwing themselves off of a love rock and suicide as skeptically as you would that this woman was 9 feet tall, had 3 feet long breasts that she threw over her back.
Yeah. Yeah. Like,
And rode into battle. Look at it with the same amount of skepticism.
Yeah, because it's, I mean, chances are somewhat exaggerated.
Yeah.
Just somewhat. We'll leave it at that. But, yeah, look at it critically, but do look at it because it's important.
Oh, yeah.
So
but always keep a critical eye when you're examining history.
Especially, like, I was going to say especially very old history, but at this point, very new history as well. Like, 10 to 15 years ago. History is always written by the victor. So always keep that in mind, because if they're going to say, she was awful.
History was written by the patriarchy.
Yeah, it really was, though.
That's actually true, yes.
Well, I guess that's all I have. What about you?
Down with patriarchy?
Yeah. Death to the patriarchy. Have a great week, guys. Thanks for listening.
Bye, guys. Fight the patriarchy.
Bye.